The stranger on the porch. A young man stepped out of an unfamiliar car parked in front of my house. My wife rushed to greet him with a smile I thought she had lost long ago. A smile meant only for a lover, but the truth that followed shattered my heart even more. Hello, friends. I know this beginning might sound like pure tragedy, but stay with me until the end. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, because what I'm about to share will take you deep into the darkest corners of marriage, where love and betrayal are separated by nothing more than a single breath. I'm 50, give or take a bad shoulder and a pair of reading glasses. We live in a slow town, the kind that creaks when it turns its head. Our neighborhood is all azaleas and cul-de-sacs and mailboxes shaped like mallards. Even the sun moves politely here. Every evening, I water the hydrangeas. Every morning, I wave to the young couple with the corgi. Every Sunday, I fall asleep in the blue recliner my brother-in-law hates. My wife, Nora, is a quiet beauty, not glamorous, not loud. Her voice lands soft on the kitchen cabinets, yet it carries all over the house. She never wore much makeup and always tucked the last lock of hair behind her right ear like she was practicing a secret piano chord. We married after a summer that tasted like rainwater and peach pie. We planned for kids, then waited, then pretended not to mind when waiting turned into years. In the last few months, Nora started dressing up to sit on the porch. A summer dress, a cardigan, lipstick the color of good wine. She'd step outside with her phone and talk in a hush, smiling into the blue light like it was speaking sweetly to her. At first, I told myself it was an old friend. Then I told myself it was a book club. Then I stopped telling myself anything and stood at the kitchen sink, watching her through the screen like it was safer, like the mesh could keep whatever this was out. I don't know when jealousy becomes a habit. Maybe it's the 10th time you hear laughter you don't recognize. Maybe it's the 100th. All I know is that on that Tuesday, when the day folded itself into a softer kind of blue, a car I didn't know pulled up to the curb. A man got out, late 20s, maybe 30, tall, lean, moving like he'd been taught to step lightly. He had gentle hands, which I hated immediately. He walked up our path as if he'd been here before, as if our house belonged to a past version of him. Nora went to meet him the way you go to meet a memory you've missed. No kiss, no lingering touch, just that smile. The kind you can't fake, the kind I hadn't seen in years. I don't remember deciding to step outside. I just did. The screen door whispered shut behind me. "Evening," I said, because I was raised to be polite, even to men who showed up on my lawn and rearranged the furniture in my heart. Nora startled like a deer whose name you know. "Jake," she said, her voice fraying. "This is Evan," the young man offered, sticking out his hand like we were about to close on a mortgage. His grip was firm. His eyes were slate blue, familiar in a way that made my bones feel translucent. And there, half hidden at his hairline, was a thin white scar, the kind you get from bike spokes or a bad childhood dare. "We were just going to grab coffee," Nora said. She said it the way people say, "There's been an accident." Carefully, like the sentence could break in her mouth. "Coffee," I repeated, staring at the porch swing we bought the year we lost the second pregnancy. We'd hung it crooked on purpose because perfection felt arrogant. Evan's smile was steady but shy. "I've been meaning to meet you," he said. For a long time. There are sentences that sound like apologies and others that sound like doors opening into dark rooms. That one sounded like both. "Mind if I tag along?" I asked. Nora exhaled, just air, no words, and glanced at Evan. He nodded. And just like that, we were 3 people headed for coffee and pretending that a man my wife dressed up to meet was something less than a storm. The cafe on Maple has a bell over the door and coffee that tastes like a good conversation. Warm, honest, faintly bitter. The retirees with their crossword puzzles looked up the way old dogs do when you rustle a bag of treats. I chose the booth near the window, I wanted light on Evan's face, something to press the edges of this thing into focus. We ordered. We sipped. We wrapped our fingers around paper cups as if heat could keep us from flying apart. "I grew up 2 towns over," Evan said, eyes flicking to Nora before every sentence, like he needed her permission to speak. "I'm a carpenter. I fix old houses, the ones with bones." "He's very good," Nora said softly, as if she'd carved each compliment by hand. "What brings you here?" I asked, like we didn't all know that question had 1,000 answers. He didn't flinch. He just took his wallet out and slid a photograph across the table. Creased, softened, loved to death. A baby in a knitted cap. The photo had the tender grain of a memory printed at some mall kiosk, back when that was the only way to hold a picture. "I've been looking for my mother," he said. It's amazing how a simple sentence can evacuate your lungs. Nora's hands shook, the way they did the day we spread fertilizer too close to the hydrangeas, and they browned at the edges. "Jake," she said to me quietly, as if we were in church. "I should have told you before." The cafe got louder, the frother, the bell, the scrape of chairs, even as the world narrowed to the inch between her fingers and mine. "I had a child," Nora said. "Years before you and I, before we were us." The retirees paused mid-circle on their O's and A's. The girl behind the counter stopped polishing a mug. I could feel the entire room listening without moving an inch. "I was 18, Nora went on, eyes fixed on the flimsy napkin in front of her. "It was complicated. My parents were strict, you know that. We were supposed to look perfect from the outside. So I hid. I gave him up to a family, a good family. I was told it was the right thing. Then I met you, and I wanted to be new." Something in me split. Not a clean break. More like the slow tearing of old fabric you thought might hold a little longer. Evan cleared his throat. "I didn't come here to ruin anything," he said. And I believed him, because his voice did that thing my father's did when he was trying to be brave for everyone else. I wanted to see her smile, to know who I look like when I laugh. I looked at him then. I really looked. The slate blue eyes, the careful way he tucked his hair behind his ear, the left ear, not the right like Nora, the scar at the hairline, the way his mouth settled, slightly off-center when he was done speaking. My own mouth does that too, in the mirror. Proof I am never fully symmetrical. "Do you know your father?" I heard myself ask. My voice sounded like the bottom of a river, stones and current. Evan's gaze dipped. "No, just that he was around. My adoptive parents didn't know much. Only that my birth mother left a note with my first name already chosen. Evan." Nora reached for him and stopped, as if she wasn't sure which permission mattered more, mine or the part of herself she'd buried so deep it grew its own roots. We should go home," I said. "If you're up for it." I almost added son, though I had no right. Not yet. Not then. Back on the porch, the day had softened into a mercy I didn't deserve. We sat where we always sit, Nora at the far end, me near the screen door, room for a ghost between us. Evan took the middle. Nora started to talk. She told the Porch what I already knew about her. The small town, the way a rumor can ruin you before you've even made your first real mistake. The prayer in a teenager's throat when a test stick turns pink. She told us the part I didn't know. The boy with the sweet laugh who moved away that August. The parents who would have loved her less if she'd given them reason. The kind-eyed nurse who found her a lawyer and a family and a way to deliver a baby without shattering what was left of her life. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, not angry, just empty. A wine glass left overnight in the sink, lipstick bleeding on the rim. "I wanted to be forgiven for something I hadn't done yet," she said. "I wanted to be the version of me you could love without questions." "I would have loved you with the questions," I said, and surprised myself with how true it sounded. She looked at me then, really looked, the way people look when they've given up the last lie and don't know how to stand without it. We sat like that until the streetlights hummed on, until the air changed temperature and the night came home to itself. Evan told us about the family who raised him, church potlucks and Little League, and a father who taught him to plane a door by listening to the wood. He told us about the scar, bike spokes and hubris, and a summer that smelled like cut grass. When he laughed, the porch swing shifted slightly, and something loosened in my chest. At some point, I went inside and found a box in the hall closet, the one with high school diplomas and yellowed Polaroids, and the cork from the first bottle of champagne we popped as a married couple. At the bottom was a photo of me at 19, hair too long, devil-may-care grin, and a thin white scar you couldn't really see unless you knew exactly where to look, the way you know where a creek hides under brush if you grew up skipping stones there. I slid it onto the coffee table without a word. Evan leaned in. The porch light made our three faces into a family tree. He tilted the photo, the way you do when you're measuring a cut. "That your scar?" he asked, fingertip hovering above my forehead. "Got it racing bikes down Dead Man's Hill," I said. "There's always one kid who thinks he's bulletproof." "I had Dead Man's Hill too," he said, smiling. "Different town, same kid." We looked at each other then, the kind of look that has the shape of a question, but the weight of an answer. Nora covered her mouth with her hand. I could see her trying to calculate what it would have cost to tell us sooner, back when we were all new and unhurt. "Evan," she whispered, voice trembling. "Your name. I didn't pick it because it was pretty." She turned to me. "Do you remember that summer at the lake? The one before everything? When we did?" She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. I remember the dock, the hush of the water, the canoe bumping against the pilings like a heartbeat. I remember a girl with a storm under her ribs and a boy who could not for the life of him imagine consequences. I remembered the way the early moonlight found us both and made us a promise it did not keep. Evan didn't say anything for a long time. He just blinked fast, the way men do when they refuse to cry in front of strangers and then realize we aren't strangers at all. "Are you saying?" He swallowed. "Are you saying you're—" "I don't know what the blood says," I told him, because this was a house built on truth tonight. But my heart says yes. My heart has been telling me yes since you stepped out of that car. It's strange, the noise your life makes when it rearranges itself. It's quieter than you'd think. Not a crash. More like a shelf shifting on its brackets, a picture frame straightening, something settling into the place it should have been all along. Nora reached for both of us then, one hand for me, one for him. The three of us made a clumsy triangle of fingers and apologies and a future nobody had planned for. "Listen," I said, clearing my throat. "We don't have to decide anything tonight. We don't have to be anything except honest, but I'd like to show you something." I went inside and came back with a battered shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Inside were small things that once felt too big. A hospital bracelet from a miscarriage, a keychain from a motel that gave us half price on our second anniversary because we showed up drenched and laughing, a postcard from a lake with a dock we never found again. I laid them out like breadcrumb stones that a man leaves for himself so he won't get lost on the way back to who he used to be. Evan studied each item like a craftsman learning the habits of someone else's hands. "You hold on to your grief," he said gently, "so it doesn't run off and turn into something worse." I nodded before I knew I was nodding. We stayed on the porch until the neighbors' TVs blinked out and the possums began their gossip in the azaleas. When Evan finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the steps. "Can I come by again?" he asked. "I mean, if it's all right." I wanted to say always. I wanted to say hurry. I wanted to say son out loud and learn the weight of it in my mouth. What I said was, "Wednesday. I'll be home by 5. Hydrangeas need water then." He smiled. "I'll bring a wrench. That swing leans." He was right. It always had. Grief, I've learned, doesn't travel in a straight line. Neither does jealousy. They move like weather, circling back when you least expect them, breaking over you even on bright days. The next weeks were a storm and a summer, both. Evan showed up with a toolbox and the kind of patience only young men who work with wood seem to have. He straightened the swing and tightened the metal eyes, ran his hand over the grain like he was telling it a secret. He started coming by on Wednesdays, then Saturdays, then whenever my heart had room, and it always did. Nora looked lighter, the way a person looks when the truth stops pressing on her ribs. Some days she cried in the kitchen and hid the tears in dishwater. Some days she laughed in the grocery aisle at things that had never been funny before. She told me stories I wasn't ready to hear, and I told her the quiet fears I carry in my bones like old nails. We were awkward, we were good, we were a mess and a miracle at the same time. For the first time in years, there were shoes by the door that weren't ours, sawdust on the porch we didn't sweep right away, a mug on the rail that wasn't part of our set. The house felt bigger for making room for him. I felt bigger for letting it. But the past has a habit of clearing its throat. It happened on a grey afternoon with rain tucked carefully into the clouds, deciding whether to fall. Evan and I were patching the door frame where the wood had splintered in last winter's freeze. He held the chisel the way I hold my morning paper, firm, loving, familiar. He pushed. It slipped. The blade nicked his hairline, reopening the old scar. A clean line of red. "Bathroom," I said, already moving, already picturing stitches. We stood at the sink, like two men rehearsing for a scene we didn't yet understand. Under harsh light, heads tilted towards the mirror, I dabbed at the cut. He hissed through his teeth. That's when I saw it again, the angle of his mouth. The stubborn set of his brow, the way he breathed through the sting. I reached into the medicine cabinet for a box of bandages and knocked a little brown envelope to the floor. It split open, spilling a few folded papers. Old results, old numbers. The kind of medical records you keep in case the future tests your past. I wouldn't have looked if one sheet hadn't landed face up and caught the bathroom light. Blood type. A pair of numbers I knew by heart. Mine. Nora's. From the years we took tests until the word itself tasted like metal. Evan's eyes flicked down and then up. He saw my face. He saw the paper. He saw something unspool between us. "Mr. Halpern," he said quietly, still too polite to call me by my first name when my hands were shaking. "Are we okay?" The fragile math of the universe sat between us, chalk-smudged and stubborn. Maybe science could argue with the heart. Maybe the numbers would tell a different story someday. But standing there with a clumsy bandage in one hand and a history I never earned in the other, I knew the only answer that mattered. "We are," I said, voice rough. "We are more than okay, Evan." He exhaled. Something loosened in his shoulders. I put the bandage on, then another, then smoothed his hair back the way my father did when he was pretending not to be terrified of the world. "Come on," I said. "Hydrangeas won't water themselves." We stepped back onto the porch together. The clouds changed their minds and the first drops fell, fat and forgiving. He held the hose while I adjusted the nozzle. We didn't talk about the papers. We didn't need to. Some truths hide in plain sight because they know you'll carry them without being asked. Halfway through the watering, Nora came out with lemonade, eyes red in a way that said she'd been eavesdropping from the hall and decided to forgive herself anyway. She handed Evan the glass. He took it with the same gentle hands that once made me suspicious and now made me proud. "Hey," he said to her, almost teasing, like a boy who's decided to make a home out of a porch. "You pick that lipstick for the hydrangeas or for us?" "For me," she said, and smiled the smile I saw on that first Tuesday, only gentler now, as if it had learned how to live in daylight. Here's the part where stories usually grab for a bow, where the child calls the man dad and the woman weaves the past into a quilt, and we all sit on it at a fireworks show, red, white, blue, exploding over good intentions. But real life is a softer kind of shock. It doesn't tidy itself up so much as it makes a little more room for the mess. The next month brought a letter from Evan's adoptive mother, careful, tender, brave. It brought a dinner where we all talked too fast and then not at all. It brought, finally, the kind of quiet only found among people who've decided to stay. The final twist, if there is one, arrived on a Sunday morning when I found a small envelope on the porch swing. Inside was a note, a photograph, and a key. The note, in Evan's neat carpenter script, said, "I don't know what the numbers will ever prove, but here's what I know. This house creaks the same way I do, and your laugh is the nail that holds my roof on. If you want me, I'm yours. If you don't, I'll still fix your door when winter comes." The photograph was the old lake, the dock, 2 kids so young they didn't even know how fragile summer is. The key was to Evan's workshop, oil slicked, warm from his pocket. I sat with it a long time. I thought about all the ways jealousy could have ruined me. I thought about how love, in middle age, is less a fire and more a furnace, steady, humming, necessary. I thought about how some strangers are your blood, and some blood is a stranger, and how, if you're lucky, both kinds can learn each other's names. When Nora woke, I poured her coffee and told her what the note said. She listened. Her fingers found mine under the table and stayed. We didn't say much. Some mornings don't want words. Later, Evan swung by with 2 boards for the front steps and an apple pie he swore he baked himself. He set the boards down by the porch and looked at me, and I looked at him, and we both nodded like men who understand work and mercy. "Lunch?" I asked. "Only if you let me fix that squeaky hinge after," he said. "Deal." We ate on the porch with our knees bumping the old rail. The hydrangeas, bless them, were finally flush and blue, as if they were forgetting last year's burn. The swing didn't lean. The sky didn't either. If you've been listening this long, thank you. Stories like this aren't tidy. They leak. They stain the good tablecloth. But sometimes they end the way ours did, with a porch that can hold a little more weight than it used to, with a marriage that learned to breathe again, and with a man who showed up like a stranger and looked me straight in the face until I saw myself looking back. If you felt something, tap like so YouTube knows to bring you more of these. And if you've ever carried a secret so long it grew roots, tell me in the comments how you learned to set it down. If you want more stories of love, betrayal, and second chances, told gently for hearts with a little experience, subscribe. There's room on the porch. I saved you a seat.